Video is about comparing the MacBook Air M1, the 8 GB version with the 16 GB version in the context of Kontakt. So, Kontakt is a memory intensive application, obviously, because it loads very memory intensive libraries or instruments, and so we will try to load Kontakt with a lot of instruments and see how this affects the memory here, the memory pressure. So for the moment, as we can see, if we look at the CPU, we have actually nothing working except the recording software, well, we have Spotify, so let's take this Spotify out, quit Spotify. So now we should have only, exactly, we have basically nothing running, and we have here this situation where we have obviously 8 GB version of the Mac Air M1, so and out of it 5.21 is used, which is kind of high for basically idle system, right? I mean, except QuickTime for the record of the screen, nothing is really running. So we have a swap of 13.5 and a cached files of 2.26 GB. Okay, so let's start Kontakt and see how this works. Here we have it started with empty, so no instrument, and we see that we have a little bit more memory used, but basically nothing really heavy. So for the moment, just let's load one instrument and see, for example, the Scorby, how this affects. We see here that it's loading, and we see here the gigabytes or the memory used. So we have 434 megabytes loaded in the memory, the rest is streamed. And if we look at here, we have a little bit more memory, so we are around 5.63. Let's load the next one, so the Giant, for example. It's loading by the way from an SSD, an ADATA SSD, through the USB-C port, and not from the internal SSD. So let's have a look now. This one, we see now totally we have 0.61 gigabyte. And this one I have 188. So let's have a look at the memory. 5.86, so it went up. It kind of reflects the memory we are loading in Kontakt is kind of obviously low, seen here in the memory usage or the memory pressure. Okay, so let's now load even one more. And it's loading, you see 0.79 gigabytes, so 800 megabytes more, and we see now here the jump. We are at 678, 685 gigabytes. Alright, so now let's load a complete instrument with 8 instruments, and for that I have prepared in the quick load here. So let's open the quick load. I have here a multi, which is benchmark multi. So let's load this. So we see here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 instruments loaded. Wow, but the total is still loading. And let's have a look at our memory. We see now that we have definitely reached out the maximum. So we have used 771 and swap file is 3.61, and it's still progressing, right? So because we see here that it's still loading. So we have now a stable condition, 5.35 gigabytes, and we reached 741 used memory and 4.48 gigabyte swapped memory. Okay, so now let's have a look. If we start, with this memory pressure here, if we if we look at the monitor, we see that Kontakt uses 8.79, so 8.8 gigabyte of RAM, and other than that, we have almost now memory usage. And on the CPU side, we see that the CPU load is actually pretty okay. So we have 10, 5-10%, so system that looks pretty well. So and if we look at this, our Kontakt seems to react pretty fast, pretty okay. Let's even stress more and start Lightroom to see what's happening to the system, because Lightroom is known also to be very memory intensive. Okay, so now we have loaded also Lightroom, and here we start to see how slow the whole system is. If I switch from one task to the other, we see that it's hardly reacting. If I go to the, with Alt-Tab, I have no reaction at all. So the system seems to be completely stalled, and even so you see the switch to Kontakt happens only now. So we have extremely lag. And actually, when we look at it, it's not the CPU. So let's see at the memory. We see that we are really stressed in the memory, but let's see if we can change to the CPU. It doesn't react at all. So I mean, you see now that the system is completely stalled. No reaction at all. Yeah, the system is really completely non-reactive now, and that's why I have recorded this video from outside, because if I had even QuickTime running, then I would be really stressed. So you see the CPU, if I can show the cursor, see even the cursor doesn't react, but we see that the CPU load is okay. I mean, we are at 80%. So it's definitely not the CPU, but it's really the memory. Let's see if now, probably it has swapped in the activity monitor, so it's kind of reactive now, but we get red memory pressure. So let's see if I can go to Lightroom, and you see no reaction. So probably now, yes. So let's see how Lightroom is reacting. If I change the image, you see how slow now it changes. Okay, so let's take another picture. Probably slowly but surely Lightroom is swapped in, so it could react faster now. But, yeah, you see it's incredibly slow. So just to see if I go out of Kontakt. So let's try to swap back to Kontakt, and let's take Kontakt out. So quit Kontakt. Okay, so now we are out of Kontakt. Let's see, the system is more reactive, so let's have a look at the monitor. Still pretty slow, but Kontakt is still here. We'll have still Kontakt, and now it's getting okay. So now we see that Kontakt quit, and we see now the pressure going down from the memory. The system is a lot more reactive, so if we go to the CPU, we see that we have very low CPU usage. Memory is okay, and now see how fast this reacts now. Okay, we see a clear difference in reaction when we scroll through the images. Okay, so yeah, that was the explanation and how memory can affect the system performance without actually loading the CPU. Okay, so here we are now doing the same test on the 16 gigabyte version of the MacBook Air M1. So we will start Kontakt and load up some libraries. So let's have a look on the memory. Okay, we have used 8 gigabyte. Anyway, let's do the same text. So we'll load Scarby EPA again from the same external USB-C ADATA SSD. So we have now around 400 megabytes and increased a little bit. All right, let's take the session horns or the giant. And we see now here the memory usage goes up, stops at 188, so total is 0.61 gigabytes. And we see here a little bit more increase, but by far no danger on our memory pressure. Let's take a last one, performance here, the session horns. Let's have a look. We see it's still loading, 0.79 gigabyte, and the total here is 1.4 gigabytes, and we see an increase here a bit of the memory. All right, so let's load up again our performance multi, which loads up 16 Kontakt Instruments. And let's have a look on the memory. We see that it's still increasing, and here we see still increasing memory usage, but no big pressure. We have usage of 11, so it's increasing. I mean, remember that for the 8 gigabyte version we would have stopped at 8 gigabyte obviously, and the memory pressure would have been but we see that Kontakt is continuing to grab memory as long as it can, probably. So, you know, as long as there's memory around, Kontakt takes it. Yeah, so it looks like it's finished to load. We have 5.35 gigabyte, but we see that Kontakt here is using 8.96 gigabytes. All right, so that's about the situation with the same instrument. So this 16th instrument, Kontakt Instruments, loaded in Kontakt using 9 gigabytes. So we have theoretically still memory left. Here we see that we have about 2.6 gigabytes left. So let's start Lightroom. And see how this goes. Okay, so let's have a look at the memory. It's more reactive actually than Lightroom is taking 4. So, you know, we're still not under pressure here. And the system is reactive, and I'm recording here now with QuickTime at the same time. So, you know, the screen recording is also running in the background. And if we see now reaction time of Lightroom, it's a little bit slower, but it's kind of okay, right? I mean, we can change the pictures. And it's okay-ish. It reacts kind of okay. The task switch is also okay. If we look at the CPU usage, it's still really, you know, not under pressure. So it's not the CPU that is shortening or is the bottleneck, but it's really the memory. So yeah, that's the comparison between the 8 gigabyte and 16 gigabyte version. And knowing that, you know, of course, running Lightroom together with Kontakt doesn't make any sense, right? But it's just to see, to show that running memory intensive application, and that is obviously for music is quite often the case, right? Puts the system really under pressure if you have only 8 gigabytes. So for this kind of application, to be on the safe side and have not too much pressure on the memory, I would rather, you know, we have now exceed pressure because we have 12 gigabytes for Lightroom and 8 for still around 9 gigabyte for Kontakt. Obviously, if I quit Lightroom, I will free up some memory. So Lightroom is away. We have still our 9 gigabytes of Kontakt, but we see that the pressure is going down. So, you know, having intensive libraries which use memories as much as they can, and you know, you can still here change the setup for the memory and take it a little bit down here. But I mean, 60 megabyte is not really a lot, right? So I don't know if what this can, if this can help use memory server. So the memory server, I think it's used if you load up several times the same library for different, you know, versions of the same instrument. Then with this one you can save some memory because you use the same instrument on different instances. So that concludes the comparison between two MacBook Airs M1, one with 8 gigabytes of RAM and the other one with 16 gigabytes of RAM. Please be aware that the native's Kontakt 6 was running on the Rosetta, because at the current moment it is not ported yet to M1. Other than that, the M1s were exactly the same, so it's the 8 CPU and 7 GPU version of the MacBook Air M1, so the comparison is exactly the same on the two. If you like this video, then I'm really happy about it, and please feel free to press the thumbs up button. I hope you learned something on that video, and if you like to hear more from me, then please feel free to subscribe and press the bell button. Thanks a lot for watching, and see you in the next one.